On this episode of If You Can, I'm speaking to Ben Cook, a former Royal Marine Commando captain who walked away from one of the most structured and disciplined environments imaginable to pursue a life of complete uncertainty. Since then, he's cycled 14,000 kilometres across the Silk Road, served as a volunteer on countless humanitarian projects, and documented some of the most extreme endurance challenges on the planet. But this is not an adventure story, because when you abandon routine, stability, and a clearly defined path, you also leave behind certainty, identity, and the safety that it comes with. So what does it take to walk away from a life that makes sense on paper and step into one that doesn't? That's what we're about to find out. I'm Louis Alexander. Welcome to If You Can. Ben, welcome to If You Can. We've shared a few messages over the years, but we've never actually had a chance to sit down in person. So I'm so happy we can share this conversation with our audience, and thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. Good fun.
Let's start strong. You strike me as someone who has given back your whole life, from serving as a Royal Marine Commando captain for 5 years to then taking the leap to humanitarian work and supporting some of the places that needed help the most, to starting adventures, often for charitable reasons, and now to supporting other adventurers on their journey. Why do you feel that deep purpose to give back?
I don't know whether I feel like that's the driving force to give back. Perhaps that's a part of it. But I think I don't know, I think my Venn diagram of interests is that I do like to do something that I believe would benefit somebody else. It's also got to be like, I've got to have a bit of fun there as well. A Venn diagram should have 3, but in this case, this has 2. But if it's that sweet spot of like do good and have fun, then I'm usually in quite a good spot. So I don't think it's like, I don't feel necessarily like compelled to like give. It just happens to be, that's what I've been kind of drawn to.
Do you think that's almost the beauty and the answer for those out there listening who are looking to take on a similar role? You actually have to enjoy it. You actually have to feel like it's not that. It's easy.
Possibly, yeah. I think there's a degree of self-sacrifice. So like people who have been on more humanitarian missions than I have, for example, like that is a huge sacrifice. It's a sacrifice to a home life, stability and security, often going to places that aren't perhaps in any way stable. So that is a sacrifice that people give, but I think it's far more nuanced as to be able to give it a very reductive, it's a good thing to do. I don't think that's necessarily fair, because there is also self-interest, that I think people perhaps deny in themselves. So, and I'm sure that exists in me as well.
I think this is why I want you to come on the podcast, because you have done those things, but you still carry the humility. You don't feel like you have done probably enough, but you've done more than most ever will, which is incredible. So I'm excited to share this conversation. Let's go back to joining the Royal Marine Commandos, why you did that and the journey that it took you on.
Sure, that's many missed haircuts ago. Why did I join the Royal Marines? See, this is interesting. And this, I think my answer to that question changes quite a bit, actually. And I think if you would have asked me at the time, why do you want to go and join the Royal Marines? As a youngster, I loved playing rugby, competitive sport. That was always my thing. And the Royal Marines seemed to nurture the same, it's very similar kind of team setup, team dynamic. But actually, I think if I give you the honest answer, and I've had time to reflect on this, I was the youngest of 4 boys. It was a very masculine household. My parents were separated, but a very, very masculine father household. And I was the youngest of 4. So naturally, like, you're born, you're the youngest, you fill any vacant space. And my vacant space meant that I was, I would get attention, for example, by being like a hard guy. Okay. Which that part of my identity has kind of fallen away, I think. Because ultimately that's not me. But, I grew up and it was like, well, if this kid punches you, you punch them back. You know, it's very, it was kind of that kind of upbringing. So I joined the Royal Marines because ultimately I was a bit of a punchbag for brothers and whatnot, but I joined the Royal Marines to be like, you can't touch me, right? So it's this attainment of a very masculine identity more or less overnight. Which, you know, I can say that to some people and they understand it. I think if I said that to my friends that I was in the Marines with, they probably wouldn't understand that as well, especially those who are still in. But it's been, yeah, I genuinely believe that that's the reason why. Because, you know, I left the Royal Marines. Some years later, I studied, and part of my studies was to do with gender and war. And it's very interesting to look at, and specifically I looked at how it is that masculine identities are kind of leveraged and used in military recruitment campaigns. And I was probably one of those people who was kind of drawn into that, because the military is interesting, right? Almost overnight, you can attain a level of identity that you can't do in most other facets of society. You know, it doesn't matter. To the layman, I'm in the military, I wear uniform. You could be in the SAS, you could be in the logistics corps. Sorry if that offended any of those people, but like, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter, but very quickly you get a level of identity. And I probably did it for those reasons, as well as the obvious. You know, I had a very adventurous time. I met some incredible people. It showed me discipline, but it was also, you know, an incredibly tough time as well, really. My mum was, she passing, well, she passed away during training, and she was terminally ill beforehand. So it was a very stressful kind of environment to be in. And especially at an age where I was, you know, 19, 20, 21, going through training. I hadn't really like emotionally matured or whatever. You know, in the end, I really just kind of, I kind of broke out from that, and it's been a vastly different journey since. So yeah, that's maybe more than you bargained for that.
No, that's why you're here, because you clearly have that power to self-reflect, which is something I'm learning to do and trying my best to do, and I think so many people out there are as well. You said a word there, identity. It's an interesting thing, that identity, almost that status. We interviewed last week Tom Dean, 3 Olympic golds, and he very humbly spoke about whatever he does in the future, that 3 Olympic golds will be underneath his name. That will be the first thing that follows anything he does. And he's proud of it because he spent 15 years to achieve that first medal. But it was a great lesson for me that you have to take real pride in what you do, make careful decisions as well. This is good advice for the younger generation, because these things will brand you. We live in a world where those titles, those status, like you said, whatever you do now going forward, you're still incredibly young. Royal Marines, I imagine, will always be on your CV. It's one of the first questions I asked you today. So it's incredibly interesting. What happens when you strip away that identity, which I imagine almost happens overnight once you leave? And what impact does that have on you personally?
Good question. And it didn't really bother me too much at the time, to be honest. I was kind of sick of the military. I was always very anarchic and a bit anti-conformist and anti-establishment. I used to have this huge moustache, right? And I used to grow my hair to the point where it was like the longest it could possibly be. And interestingly, I bumped into a guy fairly recently who's, they held a position called the adjutant. Part of their roles and responsibilities is to ensure that they manage discipline on camp. This guy hated me. Hated me. But I bumped into him actually in a filmmaking capacity. So I went and made a film about him. I went into his house and I bought part, I came into this guy's house and I thought, and he's like, Ben Cook? And I was like, yeah. I was like, mate, how the devil are you? And he's like, yeah, good. And interestingly, he'd gone through some experiences that had kind of reshaped him, but I was able to meet him from a completely different point in life. And it was just very interesting to kind of see that. But anyway, going back, a point, that was kind of who I was. So I was very excited to break out from the military. And actually, again, upon reflection, I had lots of unresolved grief that the military doesn't really allow space for emotion broadly, especially such a male-dominated environment like the Marines. So I had all of that stuff just bubbling up and bursting to get out, really. And the military wasn't the place necessarily to do that. And nor did it. It chimed a lot with certain characteristics of mine, but it didn't chime with the ones that I wanted to nurture. Because I think there was a huge denial of part of my character and part of my nature before I went into the Royal Marines that I wanted to get rid of. You know, that of someone who's actually quite, you know, I'm quite a sensitive person. I'm quite a gentle person. I like to be kind to people. Mm-hmm. And I think as a youngster, those were repressed because my household didn't allow space for it. They were also repressed in the military because there's not really space for that generally. Because really in the military, there's no room for emotion because it's decision making, right? It's all about decision making. So there wasn't space for that. So then I left and it was just like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I remember having a conversation with a sergeant major and he kind of pulls me to one side and, it was two very interesting conversations at the point I was leaving. One was a major on my camp and he said to me, he's like, you know, you should stay in the military. He's like, great, like the pay is great, it's very competitive, there's marriage accommodation, you know, it's very stable. And I was just sitting there, I was like, you really don't have a clue like who I am. But that's fine. For lots of people it works. For me at that time, it didn't. And then another interesting conversation was with someone of a similar kind of, in a similar role in the same camp. And he said to me, he's like, what are you going to go on to do? And at that point, my plan was I'm going to go cycling around the world. And he was like, yeah, but what are you going to do for a job? And I don't know. I just turned 24. I really didn't know. And that's a bit, you know, I'm a bit like blasé. I'm a bit hell for leather. I take big risks. Mm-hmm. And perhaps I've taken a few that I've had to work to kind of pay for. But ultimately that was me leaving. So coming back to your question, identity, losing that. It wasn't really something that I felt immediately. But I've only really understood the role of identity in recent years properly. And actually like its purpose, its benefit, the way that we all interact. You know, I'm so-and-so, you're so-and-so, da-da-da-da-da. But actually, you know, I think the most interesting part of my journey so far has been losing those. That you can, you know.
It sounds like, if you don't mind me saying, you almost had found your identity before leaving, and you didn't have that necessary journey of removing it and having to find a new one because you already knew who you were. You said when that person said, you know, stability, it's like, you don't know who I am really. How difficult is that though, to go from a life of stability suddenly to uncertainty and then stepping into a world which is, you know, creative, working in the world of film, adventure. I know how uncertain that can be, especially when you make it a living. And what was the first sort of chapter that followed? You mentioned the cycle.
Yeah, it was fine. I don't, you know, again, I think in the military you don't really understand like the world of taxes or you just stuff's done for you, right? Like you have a uniform, you don't have to think about what you wear. You get told to get a certain haircut, so you don't really have to think about that. You know, there's all this stuff that kind of creates this very strange, like kind of part of society, right? You know, it's great in many ways as well. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm very grateful for what it's given me. But I then was thrusted into a world of like, wow. And I was just super curious. You know, I was an adult. It was kind of cool, right? I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. Just left the military, grab a bike. I'm going to go cycle for a bit. It was awesome. I had such a good time of just letting go of stuff, really. But it was, you know, it wasn't all kind of rainbows and butterflies. Like I said, there was some unresolved grief that kind of came to surface. And on that bike ride, lots of it came to surface, which was interesting in the moments that I least expected it to.
This was along the Silk Road.
Along the Silk Road, yeah. So I remember at one point, I'm cycling. I'm laughing. And then I just broke down into tears. I'm at the side of the road having a real cry. And it was to do with grief and stuff. So it was, you know, it was lots of confusion really as well. But broadly speaking, I didn't, you know, it was interesting. And to be honest, I often say I often say, like I'm some sort of, people love saying that in our generation, don't they? But, I am a firm believer that most of the stuff that I've done that I have enjoyed or taken away from, accolades, achievements, whatever, if I really knew what it would take from me at the beginning, I wouldn't have done it. The Marines was one of those things. Film is another one of those things. Studies has been another one of those things. So it's one of those that I'll kind of stand there at the beginning with this like disillusioned arrogance of like, well, I can do that. And then you're like, okay, then you're in it, you do it, you burn all the bridges, you tell people about it, and then all of a sudden you're doing it. I'm sure you know that. Lots of people know that. But it's that's been an interesting one. So the whole uncertainty behind things and the lack of security, it's been difficult at points, but would I change it? No. I really like marching to the beat of my own drum. I like doing, the things that I do. I couldn't do a corporate gig. I couldn't do, for lots of people it works, but that's just so not me. I think to a degree I'm kind of a bit undomesticated, I guess. A friend of mine said to me recently, but she was like, but it's your superpower, and I was like, that's a nice way of putting it. But so yeah,
from a life where everything's planned, disciplined and mapped out, to one where you're figuring out things as you go. But even in that freedom, there are still a few constants, the small routines that keep you grounded wherever you are in the world. And that's something that Bob really aligns with. Bob support this podcast, and they're all about keeping the everyday simple. It's a refillable body wash for men. You've got a reusable applicator. You drop a Bob bar in, and it gives you the right amount every time. It's one tool for every wash. The bars are high lathering and designed to clean and care for your skin. It works just as well at home as it does when you're traveling, which makes it ideal for someone like Ben, who's constantly on the move. And I think that's the point. When the basics are taken care of, it gives you the freedom to focus on everything else. So a big thank you to Bob for supporting If You Can. That day you mentioned when you were cycling and you stopped to the side of the road and you were processing that grief for your mum, what picked you back up? And to those out there who are listening who may have one of those moments, it may not be cycling 16,000 kilometers along Silk Road, but maybe it's a tough moment at work or at school or university where they just feel in a difficult place and they can't physically and emotionally pick themselves back up. Where do they find the strength?
Yeah, good question. And to be honest, I think I've got a slightly different view on this, in that I think the hardest thing is the resistance to the thing, right? If there's something like bubbling away. So for me, it was carrying the unresolved grief and the confusion of like, I feel anxious, I feel sad and I don't know why. I feel depressed, I feel nullified, numb. All of those things. That was the hard part. Actually, for me, it was that expression was like reassuring, because it was like, oh my God, I'm human, I can process this stuff. So it was actually quite a nice cathartic moment of like releasing that. And then I was able to open myself a bit more to, at that time, it was the adventure that I was on. Because it wasn't this distraction. It wasn't like cycling along, I'm in the desert. This should be the coolest thing in the world. But actually I'd be there and I'm like, I feel anxious and I don't know why. And actually I'm not wholly in this adventure because there's something drawing me away. So that moment of like allowing something to come out, was very liberating actually in many ways.
You've been on so many adventures since. Let's be honest, for those out there who are dreaming of maybe their first adventure or challenge and they see this world as glamorous or whatever it is, and I'm very lucky to have some people come to me and ask for advice. What's the true side of adventure that people out there don't see? Does it actually give you the answers you're looking for?
Yeah, adventure. We're in a funny age at the moment. We're in the age of the narcissist, right? So social media is drawing people to then kind of come out and like, I'm going to do this big adventure and da-da-da-da-da. And of course, there's a multitude of reasons why people do it. But I would be interested that had the advent of social media not happened, would people still do that thing? And I question myself, like, would I still do that thing? I like to think I would, in truth. And that's quite a opinionated stance I've just taken, but
I agree with that. My
Yeah.
final question before I sign off an expedition or challenge is, would I do this if no one would ever know about it? There was
Yeah.
no social media, no even telling friends or family, none of that ego. Would I still go off and do it? And I can proudly say everything I've done it because I wanted to do it,
Good
not
on
because
you,
I
yeah.
wanted to just show off. But I'm 5 years in, so I appreciate as that grows and opportunities grow of sponsorship and TV and all these different things, how do you keep that value? That's what I want to know from you.
Yeah, okay. I think an adventure can be anything. It's a sliding scale, right? Like, yes, you can say like grand adventures, right? For lots of people, that's so unattainable, you know, because of socioeconomic backgrounds. That might not necessarily be something that they can access as readily as a middle-class white man. But like, you know, adventure can be something as stupid like taking a different way to work in the morning, right? Or like, you can climb a tree in your garden that you've not climbed before. You can do something that feels stupid and unordinary to you. That's adventure. And it doesn't matter like what you do that with. You know, you can go running in your jeans and like a pair of shoes. You could finish work and you could run home in your suit. That's an adventure. That's a wicked adventure because no one's, you know, you've never done that before. And it's a way of spicing up your life, right? It's a way of doing something and breaking out of the ordinary, to do something that makes you feel, you know, a bit more alive. For me, adventure over the years has been a way of processing like experiences. It's for me, it's an inhale, actually. I think for lots of people, it's this exhale. You know, it's like, I'm gonna go spend all my energy on this adventure, and then I come back to the world. Then I regroup. Actually, those things for me are opposite. I finish a big project. I finish a little chapter. Whether it's like when I studied my masters, then I'll go for a walk. You know, I left the Marines, then I'll go do the cycle ride. It's page turners. It allows me to process stuff, regroup a bit, just get back into the rhythm of life. You know, that feeling of like, what's going to happen today? You know, I love that feeling. That's my favorite feeling on an adventure, is like you wake up and you just go like, what is going to happen today? Because something amazing always happens. It always happens. You might meet someone that challenges you. You might meet someone that excites you, brings you joy. You know, you might see something amazing. You might feel something amazing. You might write something amazing, depending on what you want it to be. So today, adventure's got a very, it's got a very rigid definition, I believe, you know. And I think, you know, the likes of influencers who have emerged that are doing adventures, it puts it on this plinth and it's like, yeah, this is what we do, but you can't do that. That's kind of what it says, I think, to young people, whereas actually that's the complete opposite of what it should be. It should be a place of like building confidence and self-trust, you know, some self-respect, some discipline, you know, amongst other things. And it's you know, it's a wonderful metaphor for life, you know. So now, like, I don't necessarily, like I look at adventures are adventures, right? It's like a case from going to and from. You've got people who go on pilgrimages, right? So it's vastly different, and like you can define it yourself. I was in India just before, like pre-Christmas, and at the back end of this big shoot, I went to an ashram and spent time with this monk who's now a teacher of mine. But he, you know, very, very interestingly, this ashram, which is a Hindu holy building, it's on the banks of this very sacred river. This river is about, I think, maybe 3,500 kilometers long. Maybe it's 3,500 kilometers if you walk around it. But you get pilgrims, and there was a mendicant, which is a kind of a wandering pilgrim, someone who's devoted their life to spirituality, who I met at the same ashram. We sat down. You know, I've got all these lovely nuns, lovely monks around me, and I'm just like this big idiot who's just like kind of washed up there. But I'm chatting to these people, and I got chatting to this mendicant, and he said he's just been on a walk for 3.5 years around this river. But social media doesn't exist in his life, right? You get people that effectively burpee their way around, right? So they prostrate. So you know, you're stood up, you get into like a burpee position, you're laying as flat as you can, giving yourself to something bigger than yourself, you know, and then they stand up and they repeat that the entire way around.
I've seen
and they
it.
don't talk about that. That's not on social media, you know.
Well, it's only on social media when other people take videos of them.
Oh,
isn't it?
yes,
That's
exactly.
the weird thing.
Exactly.
It's other people, even though they're not the ones doing it.
Yes. It's fascinating though, isn't it? Because it's like the intent's completely different. So, and I look at people like that. I look at other people who perhaps do it for more egotistical reasons. It's a sliding scale. I don't know where I sit on that. Maybe in the middle. It varies a bit.
Yeah, I'm probably the same.
Yeah, but it's you know, that I just find deeply fascinating. That's an adventure. They're having an adventure, but their intent and their reasons is completely different.
Well, totally. Adventures, it's a mindset. It's not a place, is it? It's born in here and it's born up here.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. But the hardest part for anyone starting any adventure is taking that first step, right? It's easy to talk about when things are going well or badly, all these challenges, but often it's taking that first step. It's the absolute hardest. What's your advice out there for those from your own adventures, from spending time with other adventurers? How can they actually embrace that courage, which I believe is one of the ethos as well for
You've done your homework,
the Marines,
eh?
that you can actually start?
It's like come up with something that excites you. It's got to excite you. You've got to do it you've got to know your reasons, or at least at that time. They might become clearer as you go on. For me, I like to tell a few people about it, to hold myself to account a bit. And then commit. Alistair Humphreys, you know, the cyclist, lots of people might know him. But I remember reading a book of his years and years ago. And, you know, he talks about making a financial commitment, whether it's like booking a plane ticket or your train ticket or your bus fare or whatever, buying a pair of walking shoes. You actually don't need to do any of those things really. But like ultimately it's just a case of going, what have I got to lose, you know, doing this? And again, you know, it's that sliding scale, isn't it? Like adventure can be this very big beast that becomes incredibly complex. And actually I believe can take away from, you know, the rawness and the purity of the experience, to leaving your front door and walking backwards to work. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? That'd be quite a fun adventure. But it's just a case of like doing it, and just, you know, even though you might feel like an imposter, it might feel a bit alien, it might feel a bit strange, just like do it and commit to it.
It's that first leap. I had a coffee with one of my mentors this week, incredible mentor, and he was telling me about the advice to becoming an entrepreneur almost. And he said, if you've got a 1 foot sort of drop in front of you, a 1 foot cliff, you just have to jump on it, the other side, is that almost success? And he said, you know you can jump across it, but most people never will. But entrepreneurs will, because they believe there's a safety net underneath that big hole in the ground. There's no safety net. That doesn't exist, but they have the faith to take that leap, that confidence in themselves. And I think that's the same for an adventurer. Once you take that first step, before you know it, you're on the other side and there's that momentum and it builds. Let's finish with this. By the way, your story is so fascinating. We honestly could talk about it forever, but adversity is an interesting topic, and it's one you face more than most people ever will. Most people in life get thrown adversity at them. It comes to us, different challenges, personally, financially, family, health, all these different things. But adventurers, and someone like yourself, sometimes choose adversity, joining the Marines, going on adventures, humanitarian work such as going to Ukraine and all the incredible missions you've been on. What's the power of choosing that adversity? And what does that teach you about the adversity at home, the ones you can't choose, the ones that life throws at you?
Well, I think adversity it's a prerequisite for the opposite. So it's the shadow of happiness, right? It's the shadow of positive feelings, contentment. Like if people can experience adversity, certainly in a young age, you know, take the example of you have a kid and the parents stopping the kid from bumping over into things, or like you can't eat that mud or that worm because you're going to get sick. It feels like an act of love, doesn't it? Because it's like protection, but actually I think that's counterintuitive. You know, bump your knees, learn some stuff, right? Learn about, like, you can't eat that worm. Well, you might be able to, like, whatever. But, you know, that's very important for people to be able to establish a breadth of emotion, a breadth of experience. Because, you know, the human, that is super hippie, but like the human experience is far broader than this very narrow kind of model that we grow up to understand of what's normal. You know, say your pleases and thank yous, be a good person, get a job. We mistake comfort for happiness, you know, all of these other things. But actually, if you can test yourself, if you can test yourself and put you in situations which challenges your own models that family put on you, culture, society, all of these things put on you, if you can challenge those yourself and ask yourself, what's important to me? What's my nature? You know, can I feel completely at home by myself, regardless of where I am? You put me in a busy room of corporate people, you put me on my own in the middle of a mountain range, you put me in the middle of the ocean, you put me da-da-da-da-da. Can you feel completely at home on your own? And you only learn those skills and step into your nature by challenging yourself. And adversity is such an important part of that. But adversity's, you know, adversity's, it's different for different people. We can talk about that here from a very privileged point of view, whereby, you know, to a degree, we are able to actualize, right, in a far easier way if we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But like, we're able to self-actualize far quicker than somebody perhaps who's, you know, maybe hasn't lucked out in the biological lottery. Last year, for example, like, I spent most of the year in Gaza, and this is more about resilience, but I think it's linked inextricably with adversity. But I got talking to a colleague of mine, and he said, just because I am Palestinian, I get punished. You know? Like, that's a sad reality of the world. My fascination, which I think this pervades every decision I've ever made, is just like insatiable curiosity about like the human existence. Like, what is this? It's amazing, you know, and it's broad, and like, I like putting myself out there because it's like, I just want to just know what this whole thing is about, you know. Like, I want to be out there. I want to, I want to just understand. Like, I've just got such a insatiable thirst for it. So that's what puts me out into, you know, adverse situations. And then it's what fruit you get to pluck from those situations. You know, if someone comes back from a run, I don't go, how was your run? I ask, what did you see on your run? Like, what did you see? Mm-hmm. What did it feel like? What did you learn from that? I can't be bothered to sit down and have somebody just repeat an accolade to me. Boring. You know, I don't care. What did you learn from that experience? What did you take from this person? So it's putting yourself out there and just eyes wide open, head on, and saying, like, you know, what can I take from this? Because everything, all adversity can teach something. You know, I've learned so much from adversity, and I believe I've grown so much as a person. The journey is not over by any stretch. In truth, I still feel like an apprentice in many ways. But that's interesting, and I hope that situation never stops. But adversity is crucial. Like, it's crucial. It's also relative. Yeah. There you go.
Ben Cook, I believe you have the true adventure spirit, and I'm so grateful you joined us on If You Can today. You've shared your stories, your advice, and your wisdom. As you said, you've still got that white belt mentality, almost that apprentice mentality, but you have achieved so much. And I hope at some points you do have a chance to reflect on that and to be proud of what you've done. Thank you for joining me today, Ben.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Steve.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of If You Can with the incredible Ben Cook. Ben is a humanitarian. He is a volunteer. He is someone who has given back more to the world than he's taken. And I think that is a great example, a great role model for us all. He's inspired me to definitely do more in my own journey, my personal life, in my work life too, with my adventures, with this podcast, with everything I do. So thank you, Ben, for coming on, inspiring me. And I'm sure you've inspired lots of people who have listened to our conversation too. But of course, We can't finish any episode of If You Can without Bob's Everyday Hero. That's our weekly segment to finish the show, where we give a shout out and a thank you and a big well done to one of you, to one of our If You Can listeners who's achieved something amazing recently. Big or small, a work goal, a personal goal, maybe it's a moment of kindness, it could be anything. Just have to drop us an email at louis@ifyoucanhq.com. That's louis@ifyoucanhq.com. And each week we go through the emails, pick one out, read it out at the end of a conversation, end of a podcast, and we send out a Bob Shower pack to support you on your own journey. And this week's email comes from Ben. I'm going to read his email to you now. Hi, Louis. I've just finished listening to your chat with Tom Dean. Tom was our incredible guest last week, 3-time Olympic gold swimmer. Please do check out that episode if you haven't already. I've been training for my first marathon whilst working full-time, and I'm just about managing to get up at 5 a.m. every morning to train. A few weeks ago, I also picked up a small injury, and I could have easily packed it all in, but I decided to just go easy with training and continue pushing forward with a bit more recovery. It's nothing on Tom's story, but the episode came at the right time for me. Great conversation. I'm now working my way through the back catalogue of If You Can. Thanks, Ben. Well, thank you, Ben, first of all, for emailing us. Thank you for the kind words. And that is so brilliant. You found Tom's episode. Now going back through our previous 15 or so episodes. That's brilliant. I've been lucky to interview some amazing people in a very short period in the first few months of this show, from professional bodybuilders to cancer surgeons and doctors to ventriloquists to the heavyweight champ in the world, Lennox Lewis. So I really do hope you're enjoying the variety in guests, the variety in backgrounds, but ultimately what are their most important lessons and values and their mission too. So please do enjoy them all. And well done for what you're doing too for your own journey. That's incredible to get up at 5 a.m. to go and train, often I imagine during cold and dark mornings, then to head to a full-time job. That takes real dedication, real commitment. That's a true test of whether you want to really do this. And I guarantee you, when you get to that day, on marathon day, it will be tough, of course. There will be 3, 4, 5 hours of suffering, whatever it may be, but it will not be tougher than that sacrifice and that build-up in the months of training. So lean on that. Lean on that. You have to invest far more to get to the start line than necessarily the effort and the sacrifice of the event itself. So be proud of that and keep going. Yes, recovery is very important. Someone once told me before I started my 17 marathons in 17 days a few years ago, it's more important to be fully recovered than fully trained. And I do understand that to a degree. So take care in those small recovery treatments, from icing to eating well to sleeping well. Get into a sauna if you can, into some cold water, whatever you can with what you have available. And I wish you all the very best. I'm going to send you our Bob Shower pack to support you on your own journey. Apart from that, everyone, thank you for tuning into If You Can. Please do continue supporting us on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of If You Can. Bye now.